What is a DHCP? It's a dynamic host configuration protocol. What does a DHCP server does? It provides the IPs for the clients when they need. Um, it's a dynamic IP. It's provide dynamic IP. Let's say uh, when we start a computer on a network, um, in order to communicate on the network, it needs to have an IP address. So the DHCP server on our network, it will provide the IP address dynamically. What the process happening when a client need an IP address from the DHCP server? First, what the client is going to do is it's going to send a broadcast message to the on the network that it's going to say that it's going to send a broadcast message that it's looking for a DHCP server that can provide a IP address. So the discover message is a broadcast message. The client is going to send to a server. It's not to the server, but the server is going to respond it. It's going to client to the server. The actually it's from a client to the server. It's a discover. Is there anyone there who can provide me a IP address in order to communicate on this network? And then offer will come from server to the client. Yes, I will say yeah, XXXX. Let's say 10.10.10.0.0.11. The server will provide to the client, and then if the client is interested on that IP address, then the client will send the request to the server. Says, okay, I will take this IP address. Then that the server will send the acknowledgement to the client. Says, okay, you can have this IP address and the lease time of the IP address, and then DNS server, DHCP server information, all kind of the other informations. So in this topology, I have three routers and I have a switch in the middle. So what we're gonna do in this in this lab, uh, we are going to configure the R1 as a DHCP server, and then R2 and R3 will get the IP address dynamically from that DHCP server. And also what I'm going to do is I will capture the I'm going to run the protocol analyzer wireshark, and then we are going to capture the packets in between, and I'm going to show you those DORA process: discover, offer, request, and acknowledge process. So now I have my router up and running now. First, what we're going to do is we're going to go into R1, and then we're going to configure the R1 for DHCP. Enable configure terminal, and then first of all we're gonna assign an IP address to the interface of R1 FA0/0, interface FA0/0 with the IP address 10.0.0.2 with 24-bit mask, and then I'm going to bring the interface up by no shutdown and then exit from that interface configuration mode and go into the global configuration. Then what we're going to do is we're going to configure the DHCP here, IP DHCP pool, and what is this the name of the pool? I'm going to say 10-main, and the network, what's the network of this? It's a 10 network, 10.0.0.0 with 24-bit mask network. Then the default router of this network is 10.0.0.1, and then the DNS server of this network, I'm going to assign the Google's DNS server address 8.8.8.8, and the lease time So we're gonna assign the lease time for 7 days. So when that client get an IP address, they can keep that IP address for 7 days. And then we're gonna exit from this. And then what we are going to do is we're going to exclude some of those IP address. So let's say that the one we assigned 10.0.0.2 for this port here, and then the default router IP address, and then the DNS server, it's 8.8.8, so that's okay. So these kind of addresses, we're going to exclude them. So I'm going to give a range of the IP address to exclude them. So I'm going to say here IP DHCP excluded address. I'm going to give a range 10.0.0.1, let's say from 1 to 10, 10.0.0.10 ranges. We're going to exclude these from the list, and then I'm going to end. Then what we are going to do is now, so this R1 is configured for DHCP server. We're going to go to R2. What we're going to do here, R2 enable configure terminal. Right now nothing on that R2 setup. Do show IP interface brief. It shows as fast Ethernet is connected, but it's fast Ethernet. Its IP, there's no IP assigned, and its status is down, administratively down, and the protocol is down. So what we're going to do is here now, we're going to go to the interface of R2's FS0/0, FS0/0. I'm going to bring that interface up. Interface is up, and then I'm going to say as I get the IP address from DHCP, and then it will take a few seconds, and then it will get an IP address from the DHCP server. The DORA process will be happening at the background, and as you can see here, the R2 got the IP address 10.0.0.11 with the 24-bit mask, and R2 got the IP address from R1. Do show IP interface brief. This shows here that fast Ethernet 0/0 got the IP address 10.0.0.11 and from the DHCP, and the status is up and the protocol is up. So let's ping. I'm gonna exit here and then go to exit from here too, and then ping 10.0.0.5 that's R1, and the connection is good, and the ping is successful. Now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna capture the packets of the process. We're gonna do the same thing for R3, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna capture the packets on the R3 so I can show to you the DORA process there. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna set up, before that enable configure terminal, and then we're gonna go to interface FS0/0, and from here I'm gonna capture the packet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place the wireshark in the middle of the conversation, R3 to R1. I'm going to start the capture here, start capture. So the wireshark is starting to capture the packets here. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to bring the interface up by no shutdown, and then I'm going to assign an IP address from DHCP. I'm telling the R3 to get that IP address from the DHCP server on the network. So it's going to get that IP address from R1. IP address DHCP, enter, and then it's going to take a few seconds to get that information, and then we will get that IP address from DHCP server, which is R1. As you can see here, it's got the IP address 10.0.0.12 with a 24-bit mask. It's got the IP address. I'm gonna stop the wireshark capture, and here we can make sure do show IP brief, and it's got the IP address 10.0.0.12, and then from the DHCP, and status is up and the protocol is up. Now I'm going to show you the wireshark capture. This is what we have captured here. The packets we captured between R3 and an R1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to filter the packets here to see that easily. I'm going to packet because we're going to see the DHCP process is boot protocol, and then I'm going to enter, and then we'll bring that only those packets that need. And you can see here it's from the source of 0.0.0. Initially it doesn't have any of the IP address. It sent a broadcast message to the DHCP server. It's a discover message. Is anyone out there who can provide me an IP address? Then the DHCP server, which is R1 10.0.0.2, is replied to that the broadcast that he can offer whatever the IP address there. And then the client still didn't get that IP address. It sends, okay, I will take that IP address, and it replied to that broadcast DHCP request here. And then the server is acknowledged 10.0.0.2. It says acknowledged, okay, you can keep this IP address and whatever the information, the lease time, and the DHCP information, I mean the default gateway information, DNS server informations. You can see that on the acknowledgement packet. I'm going to expand the bootstrap protocol acknowledgement packet here. You can see here client IP address. The client got the IP address, I mean your client IP address, the IP address from the DHCP server provided to the R3 10.0.0.12, and the other information, subnet mask and all the other informations. Subnet mask here 255 24-bit subnet mask, and that renewal time value, and then the lease time, IP address lease time values here 7 days. Show IP DHCP binding. Show IP DHCP binding will show you the given client from the DHCP server. I'm going to show here show IP DHCP binding. This will show you the IP addresses provided to the clients from this DHCP server. 10.0.0.11 was provided to R2, and then the 0.12 was provided to R3, and the lease expiration times here. Let's go into the R2. I'm going to show here DHCP lease. This will show you the IP address given by the DHCP server here. Let me get the pen here. This will show you the IP address was given out from the DHCP server, and the subnet mask, and then default the DHCP lease server. That's from the server. I mean the IP address of that R1. That's a DHCP server, and that the lease time. The lease time is here 7 days, but it's in seconds. It was given in seconds. And another command is you can see show DHCP server. This will show the leases here and the offers and the DNS server information. The DNS server information shows here 8.8.8.8 is a DNS server, and then the subnet mask of that, and the leases here, offer requests. acknowledgements here. So in this video, what we have done is we have created a configured DHCP server on router 1 R1. We have configured router 1 as a DHCP server, and then we have got the IP address dynamically to R2 and also for R3.